Namaskar.
The war is coming home. Russian soldiers are collapsing at the front, and casualty rates are catastrophic. Yet Moscow is cutting enlistment bonuses while ordering commanders to recruit more men. That contradiction reveals a truth. The conquest is becoming unaffordable, but stopping isn't an option. To keep the war alive, the Kremlin is rewriting laws and locking down its own citizens. What began as a campaign against Ukraine now constrains Russia's youth through tightening legal measures. Millions are now trapped inside a tightening system designed to feed the front lines, and the plan is already backfiring. In Moscow, the parliament has been debating a bill to stop Russians from traveling to NATO countries. Supporters claim it's about national security, but Russians themselves are calling it the new Iron Curtain, recognizing what it really is: a way to stop people from leaving before they're drafted. One woman asked online, "I want to go to Italy or Montenegro. They're NATO members as well. And what? I mean, I won't be able to. Can I fly to Istanbul? But I can't go." Her frustration wasn't about war, or Ukrainians, or sanctions. It reflected concern over losing access to European destinations. That irony captures a growing divide between public denial and state desperation. To understand why Putin is enforcing such measures now, we must return to September 2022. That's when he realized his 3-day special military operation wasn't ending in 3 days. Facing massive losses, he ordered a partial mobilization of 300,000 men. Within hours, flights out of Russia sold out. Men fled to Kazakhstan, fled to Georgia, fled to Finland, anywhere they could. By some estimates, nearly 1 million Russians left in the first week. Protests erupted across the country, especially in Dagestan, where women confronted police. Over 2,000 people were arrested. In several cities, draft offices were set on fire. Even some local politicians in Moscow and St. Petersburg demanded Putin's resignation. For a brief period, local political dissent became more visible. Economically, the mobilization was devastating. The kind of workers Russia's economy could least afford to lose. Official unemployment rates hit record lows, not because of prosperity, but because so many men had vanished from the workforce. The central bank publicly warned that the labor collapse could cripple the country. Putin learned an important lesson from that chaos. Mobilization brought him troops, but it also exposed weakness. It told Russians that the war was out of control, something he could not admit again. From this unrest, the Kremlin pivoted. Instead of forcing men into service, it began paying them to volunteer. Regions rolled out massive incentives. In some places, signing a military contract could make a man an instant millionaire in rubles. Some regions offered bonuses reportedly up to 2 million rubles. The plan worked temporarily. It filled the ranks and kept public anger contained. But as the war dragged into 2024 and 2025, even money stopped working. According to The Economist, every 117th Russian man has reportedly died in this invasion. That's about 1% of all men under 60. And for all that loss, Russia has gained about 4% of Ukrainian territory this year. The math was brutal. By mid-2025, the number of new recruits signing contracts had collapsed. Only 38,000 joined in the second quarter, down from about 100,000 the previous year. The reason was obvious. The danger was clear, and the payments were no longer reliable. Drone strikes and Western sanctions had shredded the economy. Ukrainian attacks destroyed nearly 38% of Russian oil refining capacity, while new US sanctions cut export routes. As revenue dried up, regional governments began scaling back bonuses. Some even cancelled payments that had already been promised. In St. Petersburg, a local law passed on August 26th voided all bonuses promised since August 1st. Soldiers fighting on the front suddenly discovered that the money they were risking their lives for no longer existed. Retroactive cancellations risk undermining morale among armed personnel. With money running out and morale collapsing, Putin needed another way to replenish the ranks. That's when the State Duma passed a bill quietly overhauling Russia's conscription system. The old system had 2 draft periods, one in spring, one in fall. Now it's a single open-ended draft window. Recruitment never stops. Officials can summon men at any time. Under Russian law, conscripts were not supposed to be sent into combat unless the country declared war. But Putin has never called this a war. It remains a special military operation. That technicality once protected young conscripts from being sent to Ukraine, not anymore. The Kremlin has been rewriting laws to allow deployment without formally declaring war, maintaining domestic messaging while expanding deployment authorities. Reports from inside Russia show that enforcement is now aggressive and coercive. Teenagers, some as young as 18, are pressured to sign contracts near conscription centers. If they refuse, they face threats, beatings, or worse. Some soldiers later told journalists they never even signed contracts before being shipped to the front. Their commanders simply declared them enlisted. On the battlefield, the brutality continues. One recorded officer can be heard shouting, "If you refuse to do your tasks, I swear on my mother's life. I swear on my children's lives. I will personally shoot you. Every one of you. I'll report you as missing, and then I'll shoot every one of you. I have permission. You all, this whole batch, are scum." Those words, directed at terrified teenagers, capture the true state of the Russian army. At the same time, beyond the front lines, Putin is using surveillance and police power to trap potential draftees. Human rights groups report that authorities now use facial recognition cameras in metro stations and traffic stops to identify draft-age men. Police have raided gyms, restaurants, and nightclubs, arresting men on the spot and sending them to enlistment centers. For those trying to escape, the new travel ban further restricts outbound options. Officially, the law is about NATO. In reality, it's about containment, a system of surveillance and travel restrictions affecting an estimated 2 million draft-age men who might otherwise flee. Inside Russia, fear is turning into quiet rebellion. People whisper that the government is preparing for total lockdown. Some call it mobilization without announcement. And they're right. Each step, first extending conscription periods, then raising age limits, then altering deployment laws, has moved Russia closer to a permanent wartime footing. Putin hasn't declared war, yet his policies now exert wartime pressure, not only on Ukraine, but on Russia itself. Not only on Ukraine, but increasingly on Russia's own population. Every reform is designed to extract one more body without admitting defeat. The results are grim. Ukrainian sources estimate that Russia lost around 120,000 troops in a contested sector in eastern Ukraine alone. Yet commanders have orders to advance, no matter the cost. New footage from the front shows raw recruits storming trenches under heavy fire, barely trained, often unarmed. A recent analysis of combat videos describes close-quarters assaults with improvised explosives, satchel charges of C4 used like battering rams. Veterans reviewing the footage explained that 8 pounds of C4 can reduce a house to dust. That's what's being used in these fights. The losses are staggering, the tactics increasingly desperate. At home, Putin's political machine is holding for now. State media repeats that everything is under control. But control built on fear rarely lasts. Russia's manpower crisis is no longer a secret. Recruitment failures, delayed payments, and mass arrests all point to a system stretched to its limits. The very laws meant to sustain the war are corroding the social contract. A generation of men is either fighting, hiding, or fleeing, and the rest of the population is watching with growing unease. Internationally, these domestic changes have ripple effects. A country that cannot replace its soldiers without locking its borders signals deep internal weakness. For Ukraine and its allies, that means the pressure strategy is working. Sanctions, drone strikes, and attrition are pushing Moscow toward exhaustion. But there's danger in that too. When a regime built on control begins to panic, it often becomes more violent. Putin's new legal maneuvers allow him to push reservists into combat without admitting escalation. That makes his next move unpredictable, and potentially more dangerous for both sides. The real question now is how far this system can stretch before it snaps. Recruitment numbers, economic data, and social unrest are all early warning signs. If the Kremlin doubles down on repression, more raids, more surveillance, stricter travel bans, the risk of internal revolt rises. Yet if Putin loosens control, the manpower shortage worsens, and the war effort collapses. It's a trap of his own making. The longer he refuses to call it a war, the more laws he must twist to keep fighting one. So, what happens next? Watch for 3 indicators. First, whether enlistment incentives disappear entirely. Second, whether the new draft laws expand to include women or older men. And third, whether dissent begins to surface again in major cities. and each would signal that the government is scraping the bottom of the barrel. The ultimate irony is that Putin's effort to rebuild the Soviet Union may end by isolating Russia even further, locking its people inside while its power crumbles abroad. The war that began in Ukraine has now come full circle. It's consuming Russia from within. The state is hunting its own youth, rewriting its own laws, and strangling its own economy. Every new measure to sustain the war makes ending it harder. The man who promised to restore Russian pride is now feared not by foreign enemies, but by his own people. And that raises the question that will define what happens next. Will Putin's Iron Curtain hold, or will it collapse under the weight of those trapped behind it?